Hey guys, what is going on? Today we are finally getting the Anthem AVM70 installed in my dedicated theater room. This video is longer in length, so I'm going to save my initial impressions of the AVM70 for a separate video. And before we dive into this video, I want to give a big thanks to our Platinum channel sponsor, R&All Sound. R&All Sound's 1723 series offers beautifully crafted speakers with breathtaking clarity and detail and a host of subwoofers that provide authoritative bass. Whether you're jamming out to your favorite song or action-packed movie, the 1723 series guarantees an immersive and exhilarating experience. With a 60-day audition period, 1-year upgrade program, 10-year warranty, and a hassle-free return shipping if you're not satisfied, you absolutely have nothing to lose. Be sure to check out the links for R&All Sound down in the description below. I know it's been a hot minute. It's actually been 8 months since I did the unboxing and overview on this. Several reasons. I know you guys have been asking, when am I going to get to this? At the time, I had several trade shows that I had gone to, a lot of videos, had a ton of reviews in, and I was just overwhelmed. This has been probably 5 years ago since I've had experience with an Anthem product and ARC. And so Nikita graciously offered to come and help me. He has an awesome setup. We did a home theater tour probably 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In his setup, he's got a living room setup with some Paradigm speakers, Anthem products, and he said, Michael, I'll be glad to help you set this up, dial it in. We've got some changes in this. So the last Anthem product that I reviewed was the MRX 1120. That was an AVR, and so now this is a dedicated processor, which this will be swapping out for my Marantz 7706 processor.
So it's 11 channel.
Yes, so that's 11 channel. So Nikita, maybe just kind of bring us through some of the differences in this, some things that Anthem has changed since I reviewed this 5 years ago.
Certainly. So, 5 years ago, 1120 was a whole different generation. So I got the 1140, probably maybe 6 months or so after it came out. So I had it for about 3 years. That's why I jumped in and said, hey, I tweaked it a few times. I've set it up. I've lived with the thing.
Right.
This is on the same chassis and platform. So the electronics, the web GUI, the Arc Genesis. Mm-hmm. But the big things that got me with that is, I kind of heard of Anthem before, other than that it's, I was a Denon and Onkyo guy before, and I kind of said I want to go next level. But what really got me there was they're saying, hey, we got a new calibration software, right? We're rebuilding it, and it can do some things. It will do some things. So when I got mine, it didn't have phase alignment.
Sure.
It was coming soon. It had some things in beta and things like that, and that's where a lot of pain and maybe brand rep issues that they had was this new generation coming out and like bugs and stuff. And I tell you, it wasn't that many, to be honest. I lived it. My living room, right? I don't have a dedicated theater, so bugs would have been immediately like family would not be happy.
Right.
So I say by now, that stuff is gone.
Cool.
You got automatic phase alignment. This is their new series of products, so let's give it a go and see, because that should be, a change, but let's see.
Sure. So in this video, this won't be a walkthrough tutorial of setting it up, but I will bring you along on parts of that. And then my plan is I'll have this installed in my theater room, maybe give it 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'll come back and share with you a full review of what it's like living with this, the things that I like, things I didn't like, the differences between maybe this and my Marantz that I saw, even in just the functionality of it, because as you're going to see, it's not, do it all in the not web menu, but in the internal menu, but we're going to be using
on-screen display. So versus on-screen display, this, you're going to get an IP address off this thing, and whatever web-enabled device, from your phone to tablet to iPad to PC, it's got a web interface. Now that's for setup and tweaking. That's who we are, right? We're going to set up, we're going to tweak. They have now a mobile app on Apple and Android. So if you want to just turn your volume up and down, and people are like, this web UI is horrible.
Right.
It's not meant for,
you can simplify it.
Get the mobile app. It's got a nice, gentle dial.
Yeah.
So we're going to set that up, and that way you get to kind of live with it and see how that's like compared to your other thing. But yeah, the setup is less for on-screen. It's more for in the web.
Setup and calibration.
And then the Arc Genesis is going to be the software you're going to install on your laptop.
Yeah.
And that's just for calibration. And I'm telling you, I would probably say over a dozen sound measurements. But then how many times I've tweaked my ARC file, I don't know. I think my SSD's got a hole burnt on it.
Right.
Because I open it maybe a little bit, and all the little profiles you can create.
Cool.
For somebody that's a tweaker like me,
Yeah.
audio tweaker, because it is a drug.
Sure.
Is I'm getting my profiles and I'm tweaking. I'm like, hey, let me try no subs.
Okay.
I forgot what my towers sound like, no subs.
Right.
5 minutes, boom, loaded, and I don't have to mess up my profile.
Sure.
So for people that want to get carried away, that was the biggest joy I had.
Awesome.
So we'll see if you're going to get as carried away and
Okay.
playing with it, because it is addictive of, you know, how many profile banks you can have.
Sure.
And how you can start to play and customize. So the flexibility of this, I enjoyed, but like you said, it could be overwhelming. You hear all these things and you're like, do I need a degree to set up Anthem?
Right.
I brought it home and unboxed and just plugged it right
Just
in
make
and
it
got
happen, yeah.
going. So
Sure.
we'll see if you have the same experience, and tell the audience what your real take is on it.
All right, perfect.
So,
Let's get this set up and let's check it out. All right, guys, so I've made it really easy when I built my theater room. I wanted easy access behind my screen, but I also wanted easy access behind my equipment. And so all we have to do is pull this lower cabinet. It's on rails, just like that. And now I can easily climb in here and get access behind the processor. So we'll go ahead and get this connected. We'll get it set up. So right now I've got the Marantz AV7706. This is a dedicated processor. It's connected with XLR to the Monolith 11X amplifier. So the great thing with the Anthem, it has XLR outputs as well. So I'm going to disconnect all of my XLR outputs. They're all labeled, so that makes it easy to find which one needs to go where. The only other things we need to unhook would be my Ethernet cable. That's how we're going to connect it to the network. And then we've got all of my HDMIs. I've got 2 HDMI outs. One is going to the MadVR, so that is for watching movies. And then the other HDMI is when I'm gaming on the PS5, because MadVR doesn't really do well for gaming because it has too much latency. Let's go ahead and get these disconnected. We'll slide this out and get the Anthem in its place and get it connected. All right, Nikita, if you want to grab the front of this, I'm going to slide it to you. All right. And everything's disconnected, so go ahead and let's take that out. And then we'll go grab the Anthem and bring that to me, if you don't mind. All right, so now we'll get the Anthem AVM70. Go ahead and slide that in. Just like that. And I'm gonna feed this RF underneath it to you. So if you can grab that when it comes, it's gonna be right in the front. That's for the harmony.
and that's what I use at home, and it works well.
Cool. All right. And so now all I got to do is connect everything back up. I'll get all the XLRs, all the HDMIs, and the trigger and the network cable, and then we'll get this set up on the inside. All right, we'll just slide this cabinet back in here. So the good thing is pretty much all of the XLR inputs where they were pretty much in line with mine for the most part. So that made it really easy. I was able to unhook them, lay them down, plug them right back into where they were. Subwoofers are a little bit different location, but I had plenty of cable there. One thing I really like about this is you have 4 trigger outs. So if you have multiple amplifiers, the Anthem will turn those on automatically when you power it on. So if I go ahead and turn on the Anthem, you'll notice it automatically turned on my Monolith 11X amplifier.
So one thing about those 4 inputs is that it can actually assign them to different inputs.
Okay.
So as you have different inputs and outputs, you can have a
Interesting.
trigger maybe do something for your projector,
Okay.
or do a separate amp. So you might have an input that's a 2-channel only. You don't need the rest of the amps on.
Nice.
You can do a pure music system in one input configuration, and then do another one that turns on the rest of the amps for your home theater.
Cool, so it sounds like we already have some cool flexibility in regards to the amplification.
So one thing about setting up an Anthem is, because it's all done on the web, you want to know how to get to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the menu. So once you set it up, you hook up your network. If you got Wi-Fi, this is where you need to set up your Wi-Fi. So
Okay.
we're going to go to network control. So you just rotate this thing, hit menu, and rotate it, and we're going to hit select. And then here, because Michael, you have it hooked up to your network with the Ethernet cable, you see your IP address.
It's already pulling that in, yep.
So that's the address you type in. I mean,
Okay.
if you got to set up Wi-Fi, if you don't have a network, that's fine. I mean, this thing doesn't need one. We're not streaming to this thing.
Sure.
You know, audio, yes. AirPlay, you know, all those things. But for us to pull up the web control, this is the only address you need, and you'll make a favorite. So now that we renamed our HDMI input one to Kaleidoscape, right? And the reason to do that is, so you can see it on the screen. So as you're changing your inputs or something, or you need to troubleshoot, you see it very clearly from the front panel. Where it says no signal, we'll show you later. Like it's going to show we're getting Dolby, we're getting Dolby Atmos, so we're getting DTS, right? All those. And one of the things that you might want to do is, hey, that's way too bright for me. So if we had all the lights dimmed, we don't want it too bright. So you can actually control the brightness.
Right.
So we can control the front panel brightness, and this is what it's going to stay on. So we can go super low. But the wake up brightness is a separate control. And wake up is when you change the volume.
That makes
you want to
sense.
see the volume control light up.
That's pretty cool.
So you get the control and set that. Let's say we want it to be at 50, because Michael likes to black out his room when he's watching it. So it's going to wake up just enough. And this letters now, you'll be able to sit on your money seat right here and see the digit. And when it's down, you'll see that it's going to go and dim down real low.
Nice. Cool. All right, guys. So one thing that's interesting about the Anthem as well as the Monolith HDP1 that I reviewed a while back is you don't use like your normal remote with an on-screen display going through your setup menu. You're actually going to go to an IP address. And that IP address we showed you, you get that within the menu of the Anthem AVM70. And so we've already opened up a web browser and we've gone to that IP address. And so Nikita, kind of walk us through what is the purpose of this? And then there's also something else that we had to download. Kind of walk us through those steps.
Yeah, so since there is not really a quick setup guide, I'm sure there is parts of it, but and you can do that on the front. Just about all of us have a laptop, a tablet, or something. So you can do all of the setup. You can even do this on a mobile phone.
Hang on a second. Oh, I'm so stupid. Should have done that. So typically when you're setting up a new AVR or a processor, you're going to pull out your remote, you're going to go into the setup menu, and you can kind of set up everything there. The Anthem AVM70 as well as like the Monolith HTTP1 that I reviewed several years ago, you actually go to a web address. So we pulled up Chrome and we've typed in the IP address. So that gets us kind of into the back end of the setup menu. And then later on, we're going to show you the actual calibration, which that's a separate kind of process in itself.
Yep. So it comes with a remote. I pretty much never use it. So I use this app. Right? Now, I had this 3 years ago. They were still working on the mobile app, right? So there's a remote app. So, Michael, you got it on your phone.
Yeah.
So that's what you'll probably use. But we're going to go through some of the setup, right? So he's got the mobile app, Android, iOS, right? It auto-discovered it. You didn't have to remember the IP. So when I set up my wife's phone, I just installed this, and she has it.
Right.
Nice big volume control, input selection. Everything's fine. So on this web interface, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. And I don't know how much you're into personalization, but let's rename input ones and make sure your inputs are user-friendly.
Sure. So I've got Kaleidoscape, I've got PS5, I've got the Arvolution. So, and I did that with the Marantz, and that way you just don't see HDMI 1, HDMI 2. So where will we do that here?
So we'll do that here. So main zone, this is really the control. This is quick tweaks, kind of like similar to, bass, treble, things like that.
Sure.
We're going to set this all up in Arc Genesis, which is going to be the calibration software.
Sure.
So let's first set up inputs. We can set up our zone 2. So here you can rename this. So you can rename the device how it shows up on your network.
Sure.
Mostly useful to you if you're going to have multiple Anthem devices.
This is the only one, so I'm not worried about that.
You can just skip that.
Okay.
There's a lot of other features we can come back to. So the first one here for input, we can go and rename. So we can go and rename this to Kaleidoscape, right?
And we just hit apply.
Hit apply. So it renamed it here. So the interesting thing, this is what people love about Anthem, is that you can mix your audio and video inputs.
Sure.
You can select up to 4 speaker profiles. We'll get into tuning
That's
that.
cool.
So you can actually have
So you have a different profile for Kaleidoscape versus maybe an audio player, something that you're using. Maybe you're using Apple Music.
Yeah.
I could see.
So check this out. So we have,
Interesting.
I know this one for you because we were hooking this up, right? You told me this was Apple TV.
Correct.
So we can go and actually input them. But one of the things, so we have, I think in your system, just 4, right? We have Kaleidoscape, we have your...
PlayStation 5, and we have the Arvolution. So Arvolution, I think, is HDMI 3.
Right? So we got Arvolution, if I spell it right.
That's fine. And I can always rename.
Yeah, and then PS5.
PS5, perfect.
Right? And then these were the only 4 inputs. So the cool thing is you can go to input 5 and say, no. I want it to be input 1 or input 2, but let's say you want to do like just music to Apple TV, but you want it to come in stereo profile.
Interesting.
So you can say stereo profile, and I
Okay.
say, no, I don't want to upmix. I want pure left and right. So you can say...
then if I switch to HDMI 5, it's still using the source, but now we've got a profile assigned to that HDMI. Interesting.
So other things people
Even though
do,
there's nothing physically plugged into HDMI 5 in the back.
yeah, it's just input 5. So you can have, I mean, I don't know how, you can keep going.
Okay. Oh, so
it-
you can add them.
Yeah, so it's got...
So
you
these
know,
are virtual inputs then?
Exactly. There is one for
cool.
eARC, right?
Yep.
So I can rename that one, make it available as well. There's also one for streaming. This is your streaming one.
Okay.
I rename mine to AirPlay.
Sure.
Because that's what I do.
And I do that. I stream AirPlay from my phone when I'm listening to music.
So we had Apple TV Music, and we changed kind of these kind of presets. I said, hey, you know, if it has stereo coming in, don't upmix it. Sure. Last use is whatever you set it to last.
Perfect, yeah.
And then at night, you can also have a different speaker profile. So we can, later on, when we tune this, we can go and say, hey, here's one that's like night mode.
Turns off my subwoofer.
Turns off your
Jessica.
subwoofer.
So right now, I literally get a text, Michael, can you turn the subs off? Fortunately, I've got a dedicated switch under here. My subwoofers are connected to a switched outlet. So I just switch those, but here you can do it all through the app too, or through the web user interface. I like it. Now, one thing I'm looking at, I remember the other Arc Genesis 5 years ago. Honestly, it didn't seem, well, I guess that's the calibration software. That's different than this. So I'm curious to see what that's going to look like. But this is super user interface. Like the user interface, it's clean. It looks super modern, and definitely self-explanatory. I mean, there's really nothing that I'm seeing that I'm going, how does that work? So I definitely like how they've got it set up here.
Yeah, the only thing is we're not truly renaming the actual HDMI inputs. Correct. I see how I had to remember that Apple TV was an HDMI 2 for the two Apple profiles, and I got Calibration Knife, and then we'll just say, let's say Profile 2.
Okay.
We'll just need to remember to actually create a profile too.
Okay.
So we got AirPlay, eARC. You're not using it because it's a, you know, your projector is not sending back any audio, but this is where you do the TV.
So if we don't want to use that, we just hit the X. And
we can just delete it, like optical, coax, all of those. We can clean them up.
Yeah. See,
we can just leave it here. So back in general, one other thing too is we'll show the front of the as you're turning on and changing volume or changing inputs, the screen does come on. So many of us, you know, kind of maybe not have it in a cabinet. We'll have it somewhere where it's visible, potentially up front.
Yep.
So you have your front panel brightness. This is what we're changing, right? You can have it very bright. You can have it pretty dimmed down.
Sure. And
then when you actually are changing the inputs or volume, you can have it go up to 100% or maybe 20 is all you need.
Sure.
So that's pretty nice.
Okay.
Now I use my Anthem MRX 1140 in the living room, and a lot of times life happens, and you pause a movie. This is what I do. I set up to, you know, let's say 2 hours maximum, and I know that, you know, if we pause it, one other thing I do on my Apple TV is I set my wallpaper to just a black image, so my OLED is not burning in with whatever was left on the screen.
Sure.
It actually just kind of goes on. So I can come back, you know, anytime in this. So this is useful for you to set up as you need, or, you know, never, if that's an option for you.
Sure.
And then I keep it in all or volume only, and they can simplify it. So we'll keep it as on. For you in the projection scenario, right? What's the format of your projection?
So basically the 241s, I have a 2.35 to 1 aspect
ratio.
ratio.
So we'll do both, no matter which output zones. In both of the video zones, as you're changing the volume display will show up correctly on your screen instead of being clipped off.
Okay, makes sense.
So we'll set this up. I think this is about all we need to set up, really.
Yeah, so just some basic stuff. So we're not going to do speakers. We're not going to do that.
We're going to let Arc Genesis set that up.
Okay.
So we'll have, you know, our primary profile here, and then we'll set up another profile for nighttime listening. So these will come in then, Arc Genesis will bring them in, and it'll be able to select that. So we'll skip all of this setup here.
Love it.
I mean, if you're a total purist and want to hear how this sounds, you know, take out your dB meter, your laser distance measure, and you can go in here.
You can manually calibrate that yourself if you want to.
So one of the features that we talked about that is added here is the phase and time alignment that it's going to automatically do. So you could do this all manually here with polarity. So
take an REW measurement, see what works best.
Yep. But the reason to get this is you want to try the arc.
Yeah.
So let's get into that next. So we're done with this web UI. As you'd see now, if you actually go and reload your app, go to setting, go to Discovery.
Okay, so let's go. So I'm just going to click down here at the bottom right. You guys may not be able to see this. So Discovery, so I see the Anthem, and then up at the top left it says Kaleidoscape.
The other thing too that's important, and this is for being family friendly, is that many people use this web UI early, and I was one of them too. And the volume control is here, and it's very easy to go max.
Yeah, sure.
So one thing that I definitely recommend doing is set your max volume.
So to me it'd be 0 dB. Because
let's just
I'm
do 0
typically
dB.
at -10, but every once in a while I like to crank it up to 0.
Well, you know, as Michael was just playing with his phone, it was really easy for him to accidentally go and set that maximum volume, which actually reminded me of that. And then the power on volume. So in my living room, if a lot of times, you know, I have my kid is using the Apple TV remote and turns on, and everything turns on through.
My power on is going to be about -20. I'll do -20.
Okay, so we're going to do -20, but you can change that here and dial it in just right.
But one thing I do like about this is you see everything kind of laid out, and then you can just click and drag versus going into the setup or backing up and coming down to this and then clicking back and going up to this. So I guess in a way, it really does streamline it, even though you got to pull out a computer or your phone or an iPad.
I can really do this quickly on my phone. I've pinned this, like, so you open the address and just save it to favorites.
Yeah.
So if I need to quickly change any settings, I know where they are. This reflows to my phone just right. I actually use the Zone 2. So in my house, I'll actually set it to, like, I rename streaming to AirPlay.
Okay.
So when I turn on, so now this is what I, you know, with my wife and myself, I go to the app. I don't go to this in the web.
Right.
Go to the app. I go in here to Zone 2.
Yeah. So we got Zone 1, Zone 2.
And I can turn it on, and it's going to automatically turn on to AirPlay.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
The other thing too is this default streaming zone. You know, if I don't want to, when I AirPlay to this device, this is why I renamed mine. I actually renamed mine to be something else than the home theater because to make it easier for my family to stream to Zone 2. If I switch this, when I AirPlay to it, it's going to AirPlay to Zone 2.
Okay.
So for us, it's doing the bathroom. We don't use it that often.
Yeah. Or maybe you got some patio speakers.
Yep.
I like it.
Yep.
So I'm seeing more flexibility in this, I think is really what I'm seeing versus your standard Odyssey, you know, menu and structure.
Yep. The other thing too on inputs is if one of your inputs is louder than the other, how many times does that happen to you?
Yeah.
Right? You can go in here and have input trim.
That. Okay. And even, I like this too. So I don't think I can do independent input lip sync. And I found with different sources, sometimes they're a little off. I like the fact that I can come in here and I can trim that and adjust that for Kaleidoscape versus Arvolution might have a different input lag or
and I think PlayStation 5 will be the place where you are because you're sending that direct versus most of your other inputs, you're going to send them through your video processor.
Yep.
Awesome. So lots of flexibility. I mean, there's a lot of other folks here. This name is the one that's going to show up for your Chromecast and AirPlay name. So here, like for my family, I just said this is the theater.
Sure, that makes sense.
Usually it's going to have just the name of your laptop. All right, Michael, so we've used the web interface to kind of go through that initial quick setup and tinkering and give you a couple of tips maybe of things you can discover later. There's a lot more to play with. Those inputs you were talking about, we can match the inputs, the trigger outputs based on inputs. So as your zones turn on or certain things you want to kick on, you know, those things, you got all that flexibility there. Okay. But now let's talk about actual Arc Genesis. This is really the calibration software.
Sure. So this would be your Odyssey, your Dirac Live, your Room Perfect. That's the software where we're going to hook up the Arc calibration microphone, move it around our room. It's going to take measurements. It's going to EQ the software, phase line, time align, and all that.
So one of the things that it comes with is, you know, for folks is that, you know, it's got auto and professional mode. We're tinkerers. I think most of you in the audience are. So we're going to click professional mode. So this is, to me, a very familiar screen because, you know, I've done maybe 10 to maybe 12 measurements.
Sure.
You know, you move the couch, you get new gear, you're towing your speakers or...
Add room acoustic treatment.
Room acoustic treatment. I've replaced a carpet or, you know, you get a new subwoofer. So you're going to do a new measurement of your equipment. Well, there is a way to remeasure a speaker. So if you're maybe swapping out things,
I heard that.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
I had because it gets painful. You got 11 speakers. I've got 11 speakers. The full measurement, it's going to take some time. We'll actually time it how long it takes for you in your room.
Yeah.
Then it's also got phase alignment. That takes a certain amount of time as well.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is there's a few things. So let's walk through here. We can. There's a bunch of tools here we kind of don't need. One of the ones that people really love is quick measure.
Yeah.
So we're going to go here and actually do a quick measure of your 2 subs to make sure they hit that 75 dB, because as we get into launching the ARC, it's the first place where it really is going to say, hey, your sub is too low and too high. So we can do that to quickly just make sure how far we are. That way we can run that part, it's going to be a lot smoother. So let's play with that. So quick launch.
So some of the things we got to give access because it's a Mac. They're going to lock it down.
See, we also see in your subwoofer in your living room.
Correct. Yep.
So we didn't have to go and type in our IP address, or it's going to discover all of the Anthem devices. It's finding the other one.
So there's 2 of them. I've got a left and right, and I was messing around. I was having trouble with those actually renaming and saving, so that's why you've got the goofiness there. So we're going to have to rearrange this a little bit so you guys can kind of see what we're doing. Walk us through just in general. We've got a microphone over here. We've got a stand. We're going to plug that into the Mac.
Yep.
What else do we need?
That's all. And actually, the beautiful part about this, and this is for me, when I came from Odyssey. I had a like the second from the bottom Denon, and that served me well. But it was annoying to drag that mic.
Okay.
Right. And what if your rack is somewhere else? You're getting So here, the mic connects to your laptop.
To the laptop versus, okay, and that
So
makes sense.
we even talked
that
about,
literally could be in a seat next to it.
And we even talked about, hey, if we really don't want to get annoyed or wear ear protection while we're here, we can just get an extension cord and
take it outside the
take
room.
the laptop outside the room.
Makes
and
sense.
once it's finished doing its thing, we'll finish our iced tea and come back here, and we can switch it, hit go while we're outside the room. I mean, I get a little OCD. I don't want to walk in front of the mic as it's measuring my left and right speaker.
Yeah.
So you either stay here, right? Same best practices as Odyssey.
Sure.
AC off.
Yep.
Kids off.
Yep.
No vacuum cleaner.
Sure.
I saw a YouTuber like doing calibration, and like you can clearly hear the vacuum cleaner in the back.
Ideally, you want, and even here, so I've got a vent up here, so I go and turn off my AC because it could actually blow on the microphone and kind of distort those.
Yeah, and this microphone, it's got, it's pointing up. So we'll go grab the microphone, hook it up. We'll do a quick measure, and then we'll run through the actual ARC calibration, where we'll set up and determine all of the speakers, the number of subwoofers, and run that first calibration with you.
Yeah, so this won't be a full step-by-step walkthrough tutorial, but we want to try to bring you along of what the process looks like so that when you're dialing this in at your house, you at least have a good starting point.
Yeah, we'll give you a couple tips on things maybe you want to learn or avoid. So let's say save that first calibration file, for example. It's really important so you're not like, I got to remeasure everything, because you're going to start to tweak it.
Yeah.
We'll give you a couple of those tips in a few minutes. Okay, so this is where we're setting up Michael's setup. This is the primary seat. So we're using the included tripod. So unlike a cart box setup that we're all used to with Odyssey, you're going to get a real tripod. So we've lined this up, Michael set at the reference so we know where his ear position is. We've aligned it as dead center as it can be. There's actually a little dot in front of it. Just needs to make sure it's pointed forward and the microphone's pointed up. These are calibrated microphones. They're preloaded, and you're going to attach the USB to your laptop. One of the tricks to use is because once we do all of our 5 measuring spots or more, we want to come back to this spot to do our time alignment for the subwoofers after. So, but if you're OCD and want to be a perfectionist, how do you return to that spot? Well, I like to use this tripod for the primary spot, then carefully take out the microphone and then use another tripod for my measurement. So that's what we're going to do here today. So we got the microphone hooked up to your laptop. So now in ARC, we can go and set up. So one thing you notice, hey, we didn't set up any speakers or layouts.
Sure. We got a 7.2.4, so we need to tell Anthem what we've got connected.
Yeah, so now you can launch Quick Arc to like measure individually. Just make sure everything is set up correctly.
Sure.
And that's fun. Or you can launch Arc. So we're going to assume, like you said, hey, everything was clearly labeled. I'm going to skip that part. So first, select which device. And 2, now we got in, you can see that we get to select our units. So metric or imperial for that. So one thing you need to set up in here is the distance from the MLP to the left speaker.
Okay.
Because it's actually going to measure relative distances.
Sure.
This is for you not to freak out. You're like, oh my, like what's 3 feet? right? So if you know that, you can put that in here.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to pause the video. I'll actually go get my laser measure, and we'll find out exactly and plug that in.
The other thing that you want to set up is your height speakers. So here, you only have a 0.4.
Correct. So I have 2 front heights, or front in ceiling Atmos, and 2 rear.
So we're going to do, not middle, we're going to do
Correct.
back in ceiling. So now this represents your room correctly. Right? So what else is here? So we're going to do measurement A. You can actually do different measurements, including different speakers.
Sure.
So for your different setup, let's say you want to do a purist setup and things like that.
Okay.
I personally think that you can actually just get away with one measurement, especially if you have one room. Now, you know, there's a lot of other videos and tips on how to use this system, Michael. So, well, one that I trust as well is Scott Newman's video on audio advice.
Sure.
It goes into almost, you know, it's like 30 minutes or so. It goes into all of the tips in tuning and measuring this device.
Sure. And they do this on countless systems. I know they use ArcGenesis a lot with a lot of the rooms that they build and design. So I'll definitely link that video down in the description, like we said at the beginning of this video. The purpose of this isn't to go step by step, but really give you an overview, talk about, you know, just the process of getting this swapped out in my room, and then just some initial impressions once we take a listen to it.
So we're going to turn off wides. We're going to keep center, surrounds, backs, heights 1, heights 2. We killed heights 3, and you have two subwoofers. So if you have MRX 1140, which is what I have at home, that has 2 subwoofer outputs.
Sure.
AVM70 has 2 subwoofer outputs. AVM90 has 4 independent subwoofer outputs. And then the lower AVRs that they have, the 540 and the 740, have 1 output, but it's wide.
And you can always split that if you need to. It just won't be independent.
Independently time aligned and calibrated. So here, now this picture is perfectly representing what you have. You have 2 subwoofers, 7 bed layers, and then 2 speakers in the ceiling. So we're going to go through following Scott's guidance here, and then when we finish, we'll come back and actually talk about maybe adding your room gain and deep bass boost, which Scott mentioned.
All right.
I know you like your bass,
I
so
do.
we're gonna make sure and run that and get your impressions. Hey, last time you used an Anthem product 1120.
Sure.
It wasn't maybe as juicy or fun as you like. Let's see what this one out of the box is. Get your impressions, and then we'll play with these profiles. You get up to 4. So we'll keep the first one as is.
Okay.
And we'll dial up the second one, a little bass heavy.
Right, nice.
We'll do a third one for night mode.
Okay.
Right? And maybe a fourth one for just left and right.
I love it.
So let's get into it, and we'll come back for some impressions.
Nikita and I went through the entire process of dialing in and calibrating the AVM70 here in my dedicated theater room. I'll spend some time over the next several days going through all types of demos, and I'll make a separate video on my initial impressions. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless, and we will catch you in the next video.